Clearly, words must be accompanied by actions. And for me, there are two big lessons from the Royal Commission of Inquiry that we must act on quickly and we must act on thoroughly. First, we must do the right thing by you and provide you with the support that you need. Second, we must do all that we can to prevent abuse happening in the future.
Prime Minister Christopher Luxon apologising on behalf of successive governments for the abuse suffered by children in state and faith-based care. And let's zoom in on those last words. We must do all we can to prevent such abuse happening in the future. Is that actually happening? Are we doing all we can? Children's Commissioner Dr Claire Ahmed, it is such a lovely treat to have you in the studio. I always enjoy our conversations. Thank you for joining us. What did you make of the apology, the Prime Minister's apology and all the apologies and the response to the Royal Commission?
Morena, John. Well, what a historic week we have had this week. And that apology was extremely moving. And it's good to hear those words being spoken by our leaders, but now it has to galvanise us to real change. We have to honour the experience of these survivors.
Do you feel like it is galvanising us? Because apologies, particularly when you're apologising for previous governments which you weren't part of, are relatively easy for Prime Ministers to do, right? It's the actions that tell the story.
Absolutely. And no, not yet. We haven't seen as many steps as we need to see being taken to make real change. You know, we need to see full redress for all of those morehu, all of those survivors. But actually one of the greatest ways we can honour their trauma, their history, is to actually prevent this from ever happening again. And there's practical things that we can do to make that change.
Well, there's 138 recommendations, right? And the Prime Minister, so I'm going to quote the Prime Minister from his apology. The Royal Commission made 138 recommendations for change. The government is carefully considering those recommendations. When governments carefully consider recommendations, it often means they're not doing terribly much at all. He then goes on to say, I'm pleased to announce today the government has completed or started work on 28 recommendations in the report. 138 recommendations, 28 have either started or been completed. Is that enough?
Well, as I say, this has to galvanise change, and the pace of change isn't fast enough yet. You know, we have children today who are in our state care system. I hear from them regularly that right now they are not experiencing the full flourishing that they should, and there's practical things that we can do, such as listening to them better, making sure that they are seeing their social workers, and most fundamentally, that they are safe from harm in our state care system.
Most fundamentally. I mean, it ought to be as fundamental as oxygen, right, that they are safe from harm.
Absolutely. You know, and in the last year of statistics that have been reported, 519 children did experience abuse, neglect or harm in our state care system. And actually the incidences of harm were higher, 894. So that means that some of those children experienced abuse or harm in state care more than once. Completely unacceptable. But actually as a society and as a system, what I would like to see is that we focus on prevention, actually preventing children from winding up in our state care system in the first place.
I want to come back and talk about prevention. I've written myself a note here, but I just want to, one of the things the Prime Minister said was, it was horrific, it was heartbreaking, it was wrong, and it should never have happened. Then he said, for many of you, it changed the course of your life. Can you talk to me about how abuse in childhood changes the entire course of your life?
Well, I think all the evidence, it shows us that experiences in childhood, they have this ripple effect on people's lives, you know, over the life course, over the course of a lifetime.
And the Royal Commission's report is just staggering, it's shattering, it's heartbreaking on that front, isn't it? So not only are we trying to keep children safe in the immediate, in the here and now, we're actually trying to stop the ripples.
Absolutely.
For decades.
Indeed. And I would encourage everyone in our country to read those survivor stories that are part of Whanaketia, the report of the Royal Commission of Inquiry. These are stories of people who, till today, are experiencing those repercussions of harm. And they're saying really clearly that they have struggled with things like their health, their relationships, education, employment, the whole gamut. Unfortunately, thousands of them have wound up in our justice system. You know, and they are saying to us, let's not have this as the experience of our mokopuna today. Let's change the story here. And I believe that we can change the story. We can be a fundamentally different country when it comes to how we treat and respect and value our children, because they are our taonga. They are needing to be treated as precious, cherished, loved and nurtured. Every single child in this country should have that.
Which brings us back to the P word, right? Prevention that you used a couple of minutes ago. How do we prevent this damage, this harm, this hurt, this abandonment and this failure? How do we prevent it?
Well, in my view, it starts with actually valuing and respecting the role of family, of whānau, the interconnected village around children and young people. You know, every child should be growing up safe and loved and well in the care of their family and whānau, and supported by the village around them, by their hapu, by their iwi, by their community. But we know it's really hard out there right now for so many families and whānau.
So in that case, if the whānau is finding it hard, and we believe that we ought to support the whānau to take care of the child, what do we have to do to support the whānau? What do we have to do better?
Well, every family and whānau in this country, it has innate strengths. But sometimes, you're right, John, they just need a little bit more support. And so what I want to see is addressing some of those underlying stresses that we know place heaps of pressure on families. Things like child poverty, things like ensuring every child is growing up in a healthy home, things like ensuring we are addressing parental mental health and addiction issues. And so I want to see our government actually leaning in, investing in these things.
Are they?
Not enough yet.
And Child Poverty Action Group has assessed Treasury forecasts in the latest budget, and their analysis shows an additional 20,000 children falling below the poverty line. It feels like we're going backwards on some of these measures.
Yeah, well, we have 12.5% on average of our children are living in material hardship. That's going without 6 or more of those essential items that every child should have: a raincoat, a separate bed, access to fresh fruit and vegetables. To put that into practical terms, Eden Park, our biggest stadium in this country, that's filling Eden Park up 3 times with children who are experiencing material hardship in this country. That's completely unacceptable. As a small, relatively rich nation, we can change the story here, but it does require lifting incomes. It requires recognising that around half of those children are already in working families, working households. So employment alone isn't going to be the full answer here. We need to provide that practical support that will help families to lift off some of that stress and unlock children from poverty.
Is Aotearoa, New Zealand, a good country to be a child in?
For a lot of our children, yes. And gosh, we have so much opportunity here. But the inequity that far too many children, including our mokopuna Māori, our children with disabilities, Pacific children, rainbow children, refugee children, the inequities that they are experiencing every single day in their lives are preventing them from that full flourishing that every child in this country should be able to have. We can get there, but it is about making choices that prioritise children, that put them first.
I love that word you use, flourishing. It's the second time we've used it. So if we talk about inequities preventing children from flourishing, that's generational now, isn't it? So there are children, parents, grandparents, great-grandparents in the same line who haven't been able to flourish. At what stage as a country do we start to feel embarrassed or ashamed of that?
It is intergenerational, and sadly when I talk to and hear from mokopuna around the country, those who are experiencing inequities are often telling me this has been something that my whānau, my family has experienced over generations. You know, taking together this national apology, our current child poverty statistics and our rates of child abuse and child homicide in this country, these things must galvanise us to say enough is enough. we are going to commit to being a country that values children and puts them first.
Dr. Ahmed, what are we saying about ourselves if it doesn't galvanise us? What are we saying about... Because, I've been a journalist for 30 years now, and I don't know how many times I've interviewed people about child poverty, about the non-flourishing of our children. Really good people who've said, we must do better. And here we are, saying we must do better. At what stage do we feel that actually not doing better declares something about us as a country?
Well, I think we have to take this moment, we have to hold it tightly, and we have to not lose sight of it. And I think we all need to recognise that it takes us all to make real change. Yes, it takes government playing its part, but it also takes us collectively in our societies and our communities to play our role. And there are so many people who are doing incredible things, whānau who are striving for the very best for their children. And we can get there, but we need to weave those strengths collectively, but keep our children, our mokopuna, at the absolute centre.
Can I talk about, because obviously so if you come from a disproportionately tough background, you are disproportionately likely to end up in the justice system, right? And so let's talk about youth justice and the boot camps. There's a contention made by some of the current government policies, that some of the current government policies on youth justice and military-style boot camps mirror the policies that led to some of the abuse suffered by children in state care. To what extent are you worried about that? Do you agree with that?
I've heard survivors of abuse in care saying exactly that, don't let us go down this path again. I've been to the Military Style Academy pilot, spent an afternoon there, and so I've got a bit of a snapshot as to, what was happening there. To be honest, while I was there, I didn't see anything that I would class as military style in character, and so that was positive. What I did see was a multidisciplinary team working on a one-to-one basis with those rangatahi, focusing on their trauma and wrapping therapeutic and rehabilitative approaches around them. And also I understand there's been some outreach with the whānau, but that's not to say that I don't still have concerns around how we're going to see this young serious offender and Military Style Academy program roll out from here.
So you spent an afternoon. Do you have access? Could you call tomorrow and say, I'd like to turn up without quite such a orchestrated showcase, I guess, experience? Could you just turn up?
Yes, so our team at Mana Mokopuna Children and Young People's Commission, we are a monitor under the optional protocol to the Convention Against Torture. That sees us go into all Oranga Tamariki residences, youth justice and care and protection, and community-based remand homes and mental health facilities where children are deprived of their liberty. And we can do that unannounced, and we do that monitoring unannounced, so that gives us a clear view in.
So people who are watching this will be wanting to know what we can do. So let's end on what you feel most hopeful about it being transformative. What would you most like us to do as a country now?
When it comes to our children, what I'd most like us to do is recognise that this generation coming through, they are the kotahitanga generation. They are dealing with huge issues and challenges, but yet they are saying, let's work together, let's find solutions to these problems. And actually, if we listen to what our children and young people are telling us, they've got all the solutions to many of the big problems facing us. So that's one of the most powerful things that each and every one of us can do every day. Actually listen to children and young people. Seek out their views, amplify them where you can, and be alongside them. Believe in them, cherish them, nourish them.
Are you hopeful?
Yes, I'm always hopeful, John. And it is our country's children, our country's mokopuna, who give me hope, because they are showing us the way on many of these issues. If we listen to them, if we get alongside them, it's going to be better for them, it's going to be better for all of us. And the fact is that when whānau thrive, children thrive, we all thrive.
Dr. Claire Ahmed, Chief Children's Commissioner, thank you so much for joining us this morning. I really wish you well with your very important work. Lovely to talk to you.